All right. So we're going to be learning how to use Vicon today. First, we're going to download it. I'm on a computer that does not have Vicon on it right now. I can't actually get it on here because you need a license. We'll get to that, but I'm going to show you all the steps up until that point. Then we're going to switch over to my laptop that actually has Vicon, and we'll go through some things that you're going to be doing for me. Help me out. So here's Vicon. We want the Nexus software is the one we want. So we go up to software and the Nexus. We want to download it. And of course, when you click it, what it actually does is it pulls you just down here. And you're going to need to input your email. I would just put your VT email into it because that's going to be the one that you're going to be probably using with it. And just so they know that you're actually a student, which is nice. Don't sign up for email updates. That doesn't really matter. You want to agree to terms and conditions. That's great. So you just hit download software. It gave me some error, but it is downloading. So I don't know what that was all about. But yeah, so it's going to start download. It's a pretty big file. So I'll cut to when I actually have it downloaded. All right, here we are on the desktop. Here's what I downloaded. So what I'm going to do is I want to extract onto the desktop. It'll just do it right away. Nice copy. It'll be fun. And from here, it opens it up. How nice of you. We're going to do the executable file. It's protecting my PC. Thank you, Windows. But even though you don't know what Vicon is, I do. So we're going to let it run. I don't know if you can see my screen, but you're never going to know my password. All right. And then you just do the setup wizard, accept the terms. I don't know what this is, but just hit next, and then it starts installing. And so this is a little bit of a lengthy process. It brings up a whole bunch of terminals, but I'll skip to when it's done with that. All right, so now it's all done. We hit finish, but it's going to keep doing things, and then it actually needs to restart in order to finish everything. We'll get to that screen soon. All right, so we have restarted now, which is cool. And we are back. And so if we try and start up Vicon Nexus, it's going to give me this, which is not Vicon Nexus. So these other ones you can just ignore. But you all are going to need to request a license from Vicon, which is fine. You don't need to pay anything. They just need to know why you want to use it, because this isn't like, just given to anyone. It's mostly just for academic things. So if you do request license, which is what I did when I did this a while back. See, look, it's already filled in. Wow. I did this early to test and make sure it all worked. So for your contact name, this is all not going to be filled in. For your contact name, put your name, obviously, and then put in your Virginia Tech email, just so this is going to be the email that it emails it from, right? So it knows that it's from Virginia Tech. Just put, this is what I put, and they gave it to me. So I would also just put this stuff in. That's fine. You want a standalone license to your computer. And I don't know what everything down here is, but you don't need to worry about that. So if you do, go to email request. All right, so that was dumb. For whatever reason, it did like the Windows thing, but the last time I did it, it just opened up Firefox when I hit email. So whatever, but you either have to log in or it's going to ask you some way that you want to email. But I just logged into my Virginia Tech email through whatever this app is. And so the key is it's going to be sent from your Virginia Tech email to, the people at Vicon. And all you need is to fill in here what you want to, what your explanation for why you want the license is, and then just don't change any of the stuff down here, because this is all stuff that they need for whatever reason. So let me show you what I put in my email. All right, so this is what my email was. I basically just introduced myself and said why I needed my Vicon license. I wanted it on my laptop so I could do some data cleaning. Essentially, all I would say if I were you is I would just say, my name is blank. I'm an undergraduate student at Virginia Tech in ISC or whatever your major is, and I need to help. I guess you can mention my name. They I've called them several times, so they may know me over there. But I would just say, hey, I'm working for a master's student named Stephen Dooley, and he wants me to help with labeling and gap filling with a lot of his data because there's a ton of it. So I would love a Vicon Nexus license on my laptop. Thank you. And then, send it out. And then within 3 days, I got this email back. Wait, never mind. This was just a request. Let me go. Where is it? There it is. Never mind. Here it is. Yeah. So I got this email and it had attached a file that I needed to like put in. So it goes through all the steps because I can't obviously do it on this computer. But once you get that back, then you can actually start working on it. So I'll ask y'all about, if you've gotten your Vicon license back, and we'll work through that. So once you have that, then you actually have Vicon. So I'm going to switch over to my laptop now, and we are going to look at Vicon.
All right, so now we're on my laptop. So I'm going to share a Google Drive folder, this Google Drive folder with you all. It has 2 folders in it, the unlabeled, all the pre-files and all the post files that I want you to copy and paste into it. So we're going to go into the before because obviously nothing's been done yet. So here are all the subjects. Notice there's no subject 1. I'm working on that. Don't worry, that's not going to be assigned to anyone. That's only me because all the data is a little janky because it was the first subject, but that's okay. So I want you to download one of these subjects. I'll assign it to you, and we'll figure all that out later. But say I wanted to do subject 2. There's like a folder in here with a date when it was recorded. And then there's just a whole bunch of stuff that's not really understandable, whole bunch of different things. So what I want you to do is I just want you to download one of these subjects. Okay, so just the folder, don't worry about it. So I'm going to download this folder. All right, and it's going to zip it up, and I'll cut to when it's downloaded. All right, so it's downloaded with this crazy name, and I want to extract it. So we're going to extract it, and I'm just going to keep it here. You can have it be wherever you want. I don't really care, but I'm just going to call it S2 and take off all that stuff. We're going to let it extract, and I'll cut to once that's done. All right, cool. So we're all done, and it's, in our downloads, and we got the S2 with that date thing with, all this crazy stuff. Okay. And these are just all the trials, so you don't got to worry about that. Okay, so what we're going to do is, if you've opened up Vicon, you've done the license thing that we talked about in the previous section. It's going to look a little something like this, I'd imagine. And right now it says there's no trial. I'll go over the basic parts right before we get to what we just downloaded. So the left side, you're not going to have to worry too much about that. It's just going to list all the different cameras and like the force plates once you actually pull it up. This top part, you can change what it looks like from here, but we want 3D perspective. If it's showing anything different, I don't know when you first download it. And then here is going to be like your file selection area here down at the bottom. And then on the right, there's a whole bunch of different options. But we are mostly going to be caring about this one, which has a little label. As you can imagine, we're doing labeling, so that's a big part of it. But we may delve into this setting once a little bit, which I'll tell you about once we get there. All right, so we want to navigate. I don't know what it's going to default to, so I just went all the way back in the directory, but you want to navigate to what you like, like where did I download? I downloaded in downloads, right? So we're going to go to downloads, and I know it's in my graduate year. Here's the S2 that we're talking about. So when I click in that folder, you see that there's a little symbol. It's not just like a folder. Like if I click back here, it's just like a little folder symbol there. When I click inside of it, that is a patient, is the way they call it, whatever reason. So this is the S2 patient. And then here is the session, which is just this date. It only took 1 session, which was nice. So if I double click on that, it now opens up into all of the trials. All right, so here are all of the trials for subject 2. So that is how we access all of them. They've all I've gone through all of them, and it's been quite a mess of all the different things that I've had to do, but now we're just in the labeling phase, which is nice. So I'm not going to actually click on these just yet. We're going to move over to a different subject because I think it explains the filling gaps better. Right, so we're actually in subject 15 now. Subject 15 was really nice because all of his markers were always pretty visible. He, came prepared with all of his athletic movements, so that was great. And so I've already pre-labeled this one, but let me show you what one that isn't pre-labeled. It's going to look like this, where there's just a bunch of gray dots floating. So this is your timeline. You can click and drag through the trial. So if I were to play it, you can see that this one, it's very short and it's kind of laggy, but that's okay. It's just because I'm recording. But it's a slip, so you can see his feet go forward. Let me zoom in here. You can zoom in by holding down right click and zoom, moving up with your mouse. You can see if I go forward, his feet move forward. Oh, and then he steps back. He takes a couple steps, and then it ends on the third step. So every trial begins right when the perturbation happens, and then at the end is when the third step hits the ground. And you can see these little black marks, they're called events, is when their feet hit the ground, because those are key areas that I want to look at. So anyway, but you can see that there's a whole bunch of different gray areas. If you hold down your scroll wheel, or like the middle mouse button, you can kind of float around, hold that down. And so you can right click to zoom back out, and then obviously you can left click to kind of rotate around. So you can see there's just a whole bunch of gray markers floating around. So those are all the markers that the cameras see. So what we want to do is we want to make it look like, let me scroll down to this one. Oh yeah, this one. We are not going to change whatever I did. I don't remember what I did. All right, so if we open up this file, this is what we ultimately want it to look like in the end. You can see that there's 4 floating markers up there. I'll get to that. But we want it to look like this. This is all the different markers have been labeled. So that means you can see over here on the right, on the labeling part, it automatically pulled it up because in every subject there is a subject. So that's what this red thing is. That's the subject, and it comes with all these labels, right? So you can see that there is the right hit, the left hit, the 2 shoulders. There's 4 neck markers, which we'll get to. Those are what those floating ones are. The right knee, and then just all of your right leg. So right knee, ankle, toe, heel, left knee, ankle, toe, and then heel is the last one. All right. I'm going to hit escape to get out of this like selection thing. We'll get to that. All right. So this is what we want it to look like in the end. This is one I've already pre-done. All right. And you notice if I go through the trial, everything stays labeled throughout the trials. And whenever these gray dots are disappearing, it just means that the cameras couldn't see the markers in that instant. For whatever reason, it couldn't detect it. The cameras were kind of off, to be honest with you, the entire time. I tried fiddling with them so much, but that is going to take some finagling to make it, this is probably just a calibration issue, the fact that they're kind of disappearing all the time, but it's fine in the case that we are going to do some gap filling. You can see that they kind of only disappear every once in a while. But anyway, this is what we want it to look like. Just this body. We care about the feet and legs mostly. We kind of care about the torso. That's why the shoulders are there. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to start from the one that we were just looking at, this slip one. And we are going to just label. I'm just going to do it with you. All right. So it may be a little bit rambly. All right. So how you do it is on the right side here, you have all of the labels like we went through in the labeling menu if you don't see it. And what we want to do is we want to go through the whole trial and label all the markers. Now, a key thing before we even start labeling are 2 things. One, what we want to do is we want to unclick this auto advanced selection, because what this does, I'll just show you. If I choose right hip and this is his right hip, the subjects are always facing at you by default. So just know that, but you can kind of look at their feet. Like if you look at, oh, 1 second. Yeah, if you look at their feet, you can kind of see that their toes are in front of their heels. So you can tell, and also based off if it's a slip or a trip, whatever. But this is their right hip, so just try and not mix those two things up. But if I click on right hip, it automatically advances it to left hip, which is what is not as good when your data is not as clean as it can be, because you're going to have to do some gap filling, which we'll get to. So we want to unclick that so we don't have that labeled at all. So I'm going to hit escape to get out of that kind of selection thing, and I'm just going to right click on this and unlabel it from now on. All right. Second thing is we want to unclick that, and it should just stay unclicked. I don't know, maybe if your Vicon like crashes or something, it'll come back up. The second thing is we have this backward, whole, and forward. All right, what we want to do is we want to click forward. The reason being is because if I choose whole, for whatever reason, sometimes Vicon, right, if I click on this marker, you can see that it is, let me zoom on it a little bit. Here's the right hip. You can see it only exists for the first few frames, and then it blips out of existence for a second. So Vicon doesn't know that this marker on this frame, right, it's 100 frames per second. It doesn't know that this marker on this frame is the same if I move 1 frame forward, if it's the same marker, right? From a computer's perspective, we cannot, or like from a human perspective, we can obviously tell that all of these markers are the same, right? It's just the right hip one, and then it just happens to be gone for 1 frame. That's fine. And we just keep moving, and you can move with the arrow keys through it. It just disappears every once in a while. But from a computer's perspective, it can't really know that, right? So it is going to do its best guess, right? And say, oh, okay, these are all the same marker. It's all the same, like unlabeled trajectory is what it's called, but it's the same unlabeled marker. And then it says it doesn't exist anymore. And this is a whole new unlabeled trajectory. And then this one's a whole new unlabeled trajectory that only exists for like half of the trial. And then it disappears again, and it's a whole new trajectory, right? So the reason why we're choosing forward here is because what it's saying is that for whole, it means for this entire trajectory's life, label it for that. What forward is saying is from this point forward, only label it that. So for instance, if I label it right hip, so we can see, let me hit escape. So this marker, we'll do the beginning one. This marker exists only until frame 190. You can see it disappears at frame 190. And you can't really see it in the video maybe, but it's like slightly darker everywhere else except for between the beginning and 190. But anyway, it only exists from here to there. If I were to choose whole, it means it would label it for that entire time. If I choose forward and I label it, so I click on right hip, and then I just click on the trajectory, and I'm going to hit escape, it is unlabeled before that point that I clicked it. I did it in the middle of the trial, and now you can barely see it. It's like orange, right? It's now labeled. It's not labeled before. So the right hip is only labeled from that point. The reason we're doing that is because sometimes, for whatever reason, Vicon is a little silly, and it can think that a trajectory, it happens very rarely, but we're just doing this just so it doesn't happen every time. It can be like, see, this one only exists until 190 as well, for whatever reason. But for some reason, Vicon, with its guesstimating thing, say it's chugging along, it's think it's the toe marker, right? And then halfway through its life, just 1 frame later, it switches over to this one, right? And then it's labeled for some amount of time, right? And Vicon thinks it's the same marker, but it's not. Obviously, we know it's not the same marker. But if we label it, and then we're labeling it, and we labeled it with whole, then halfway, all of a sudden, now this marker is going to be the right toe, right? Because we labeled the whole thing as the right toe if we did it as whole. But if we do forward, when we notice this mistake, when we're scrolling through it, and we see that this is switched to the right toe, we can just relabel it with forward, and then it switches and it fixes it for the rest of the trial, right? Because it was correct before, we just needed to be fixed from now on, right? So if that seems too confusing, I didn't explain it in a great enough way, just no click forward and then just work from left to right. That's the best way I can put it. Okay. So let us actually just start working and doing what we need to do. So this is an example of a good trial. The reason why I say it's a good trial is because all the markers are basically there. It may disappear every once in a while, but it's not going to be that bad. Okay. So we're going to choose right hip. We're going to start with that. You can start with any of them. It doesn't really matter. But we have forward on, this unchecked. We're going to do right hip. So what that means is this is now labeled as right hip, but you can't really see it here. But if I hold the right down arrow, and let me zoom in on it just so it's because it's not moving that much, right? I'm going to hold the right down arrow until it disappears, right? And the very first frame that this one appears again, I'm going to label it again. So now it's labeled. Oh, it disappears again. So I'm going to go to the first frame where it's labeled. We're going to hit right, keep on going. Let's hope it's labeled the whole time. Oh, no, it disappeared. So you can just hold down the arrow button and it'll like slowly scrub through it. Most of these trials are very short, so you don't have to worry about it. Now this one unusually has quite a few gaps, but that's fine. We're going to just keep clicking through the arrows. It keeps disappearing. The other ones don't seem to disappear this much, so we really lucked out with the right hip being the first one we ever did. All right, so what we have now done is throughout the whole trial, so even in this selection mode, you can just use your mouse the same way. The whole trial, whenever this markers appear, it is now the right hip, right? And that's what I want you to do after labeling everything. It's just to make sure you go through the whole thing and right hip stays the right hip, right? So now we're going to do the left hip. Left hip seems to be much easier. I'm just going to hold down the right arrow, and you can see very faintly there is now an orange line between them. As you build out the skeleton, it's going to become a lot more obvious, and it's going to be a lot more obvious when it changes color. So great. So the entire trial, the left hip was there, and we're just chugging along, which is great. So now we're going to move up to the right shoulder on the very first frame. So I'm going to just move this up. Here we are. There's all those neck markers, which we'll get to once we actually talk about the neck markers. So here's the right shoulder. So as you can see, it's starting to draw more lines here. Oh, it's thinking about it, but it's staying labeled the whole time. Nice. Awesome. So I'm going to just click back to the beginning. Yeah, I'm just going to scrub through and make sure that nothing changed. I don't know why it randomly was unlabeled for a second there, but that's fine. All right, and then I'm going to go to the left shoulder. Oh, I must have not been on the very first frame when I did the labeling. Anyway, that's fine. Let's see if the left shoulder disappears at all. It doesn't look like it. Seems like this guy was just floating around. Awesome. All right. So you can get the gist of what I'm doing. I'm going to do the entire thing. So if you want to skip this part of the video, that's fine. But don't skip right now because this is important. So for the neck ones, all right, these neck ones, I only want you to label any of the necks, okay, if the shoulders are really bad, all right? Some subjects, the shoulders, maybe one of the shoulders isn't there the entire time. If the shoulders are, the only reason I have these neck ones here, right? It's not to get some neck angle. That this is like a I don't know what they're called, a headband around their neck, right? The only reason I have these shoulder markers is because I need to get their torso angles. So for instance, I mean, this is not a good trial because, you know, it's a very low speed, but you can see as soon as their first foot hits the ground, they're leaned back a little bit more than they were when they were standing up, right? So they changed very, very little in terms of their torso angle, but you can imagine on these larger trips, they're going to fall forward a whole lot more and that is an indication of whether they've fallen or not. So the whole reason I have these shoulder markers is to get the torso angle. If the shoulder markers aren't there, I can't get the torso angle right. So I can get an approximate measure by using any of these neck markers, right? It's going to be close. I just need to be consistent because it's more of a change in a torso angle. It's not an absolute torso angle. So I take the torso angle from the first frame and then, get the torso angle on another specific frame and see the change in that, right? So only do these neck markers, all right, if both shoulders are just really inconsistent the entire time. If one of the shoulders is clean and the other one's just not there for whatever reason, that's fine. Just stick with the one shoulder. If you want to label the neck ones, that's great. But the reason why I have neck 1, 2, 3, and 4 is just if they're all there, but I really only need one of them, right? And so that's just an option. I just needed to do that for the subject. I needed to have all of the markers have an availability for the labels. So only do the neck ones if both shoulders suck, okay? But that shouldn't happen that often. So you don't have to worry about the neck ones. So that's why them being floating around is fine. All right. So we're going to just skip all the neck ones and we're going to go right into the right knee. All right. And so you can skip this whole labeling part if you feel comfortable with it, but I'm just going to keep doing it. Okay. So the right knee, we're going to use the arrow, continue through, it becomes unlabeled. And I'm sure there's, see like here, there's not even a gap, right? But Vicon just doesn't realize that these two are the same marker, right? So, and see, it was just like for one frame. It was this weird, and now it's not detecting it again. So Vicon's really stupid. So I'm just going to have to go frame by frame. There we go. We're back. Never mind. Why did I speak so early? The right side of the body sucks. I'll just tell you that for a lot of the trials. The left side's a lot more consistent. That's okay. All right. So the right side, the right knee is good throughout. And we're going to do the right ankle. And I will just mention that this is normally way quicker. It's just because I'm recording right now. So if this looks slow as hell, it's because it is. But that's only because it is right now. Normally it just scrubs through it like at normal speed. So you do not, and I'll mention this in the lab tomorrow because I'm recording it before the lab. That it really slowed down my computer. So if you're not recording on Zoom, you should be fine, and this should go way quicker. But this is just to elaborate the point. Awesome. Now we're going to do the right heel. The feet are always going to be pretty consistent. The amount of times that it's becoming unlabeled is pretty not standard, I would say. Like this right heel was just consistent throughout, right? It really wasn't that bad the entire time. So, and it's also the right side of the body. Like I said, the right side of the body. There was one less camera on that side because there was a faulty Ethernet cable. So for a lot of the trials, whoops, I forgot to even label it. Left ankle. It should be this one, but I will. Yeah, that one's in front of the other one, so it has to be that one. Okay, so here's the left ankle. But yeah, you can see for most of the feet ones, it's just consistent throughout. It's mostly the upper body that's going to have some gaps in it, which we'll get through, don't worry. So here is the left toe, it's still labeled, so you can tell if it's labeled just because there's the line still happening there. One thing I would say, and I'll reiterate this later, is it's good to save often throughout you doing this, especially if for whatever reason your Vicon crashes. Like if you find that happens a lot, if you save often, then you don't lose as much data, which is true for really anything. But all right, so that's all of them. All right, so the labeling is all done. Before we get to the gap filling, I want to talk a little bit about some other things. So one, you can see these markers, right? So just like the neck markers, that's part of the body. These markers are just on the treadmill, and they're just so I can look back later and look at the speed of these markers just to verify that these markers are, what am I saying? Just to verify that the treadmill is traveling at the speed, because in Vicon right now, I have no idea how fast the treadmill is heading. So I have these markers on there just to see that. So don't worry about those. And then I was noticing as I was doing the right foot near the end here, sometimes you get these like phantom markers. So here's one. Oop, whoops. Here's one. And then I think there's another one that like pops up. Oh, well, I guess there was one or no. Okay, there we go. There's some other phantom markers. Sometimes it's just there's reflective stuff on people's shoes. So don't worry too much about those. Just leave those unlabeled. It's not going to be an issue for all my calculations. So don't worry about those. You can delete them if you just right click and say delete trajectory, but it's not exactly necessary. So if we play this from the labeled stage, you can see it's lagging so much that it's not. I'm going to just hold down right click through it. You can see that the person slowly falls back. The hip markers disappear every once in a while. The neck markers are disappearing. But like I said, we don't have to worry about those because the shoulders are pretty good throughout this trial. So how do we fix the gaps? So the gaps are when like this right hip disappears, right, for this one frame. It just disappeared for not that long. It's fine. We don't have to worry about it. So you can kind of tell that, you know, in between these two frames, it's probably just like in the same place, right? And so how do we fill in gaps? Well, the you can see here that this is weird. One second. So you can see here in this gap filling area of the same exact thing. Here's the labeling in this gap filling area. It has all of the different gaps that exist. So here is one where one second. Yeah, okay. Here's one where the right hip has a gap of 2 for whatever reason. So that's only 2 frames. That's 2/100ths of a second, right? So there's many different ways you can fill it. The only gap filling method, which are all these down here, the only gap filling method I want you all to use is the spline fill, okay? Because all the other ones require a little bit more markers in order to do, but they're kind of explanatory. Like if you have a certain pattern that'll fill, and you know, rigid body, we don't have a lot of rigid bodies. We don't have as many markers in order to have rigid bodies and things like that. So we're just going to use the spline fill. So in this one, we can click fill, and you can see that there's a bunch of gaps to the right hip. Remember when we had to label it, it kind of sucked. So if we just click all, it's just going to do, and it says in this little tooltip, it's going to fill all the gaps in this trajectory or in the right hip, right? So there's a bunch of number of gaps. So I'm just going to click all here, and it just fills all of them with the gaps. Now here, right, here it is gone for a frame. Now, why couldn't it fill it with the gap? Well, you saw that it showed, oh, okay, wait, never mind. The reason why I couldn't fill it initially is because there was like a missing, in order to spline fill, it needs the slope of the graph, right? And there's too much gaps around this gap, then it can't figure out that slope. But since we gap filled those gaps, then we were able to fill it again. So if you click all again, if it's not giving it to you, that's fine. If there is no way you can fill the gap with the spline fill, that's fine. Then just leave the gap. That's not an issue. Okay. It's just so it's more clean. So now, as you can see, the right hip is there the entire time, which is great. And then secondly, this maximum gap length, I want you all to choose 10. So 10 is a tenth of a second. Within tenth of a second, it can pretty much figure out, based off the curvature and everything, how it's going to fill the gap and where the trajectory should have been. Beyond that, it's a little bit too unknown what is happening in that amount of time. So just do a max gap length of 10. And then one more thing before we do another example. I mentioned this during the thing, but you may have skipped it. Try and save as often as possible, because Vicon may crash at any point, and I'm surprised it hasn't crashed now, considering I'm also running Zoom at the same time, but miracles do happen. So one thing I do want to point out is, so you can imagine that with the many trials that I had to go through, it would suck a lot to do a lot of the things that I did manually, and a lot of it I did not do manual. I did a lot of it manually, but I did a good chunk of it not manually. What you can do in this settings menu is you can actually create pipelines. So what a pipeline is it just automatically does something, and you can see there's a whole bunch of different options you can have, and a bunch of different things that you can have, so like events and things like that. One of the most important ones is a fill gaps feature. So instead of doing this gap filling thing and going through in each individual one, if you just want to automate it for the trial, what you can do is I'll show you just how to make it, is you can make a new pipeline. So we'll call it new. And if we go up here to fill gaps, we want to fill gaps Woltering, whatever that is. But that's the spline one. I don't know why they don't just call it spline fill, but it's the Woltering Quintic spline. Sounds really cool. And so if we save this, we can call it whatever. I'll just, do some things, and then I just make it private. I don't know what shared versus private means. But if we click in here they have the max gap length. I'm going to make that 10, like I said. We're talking about frames. We don't want to do seconds. So 10 frames, so a tenth of a second. And then the first and the second frame, so this is just over the period that it's looking at. We are going to do the first frame and the end frame. So we wanted to do it over the entire trial. And we're going to save this. So if I just go over here, go to the pipeline that I created, there's a whole bunch of Nexus ones that are already in here, but I go to the pipeline I created and I hit play, then it automatically does it for me, right? So it fills all the gaps instead of having to do it. So I would recommend doing this instead of going through the manual gap filling. But if you ever, if it's just one gap or there's like no gaps, then don't worry about it. So, but now if we look at it, and I'm not going to hit the play because as we saw, it didn't really work out. Now, if we look at it, we just hold down right, nothing disappears the entire time. There's just, the skeleton is there the entire time, and this is a perfectly good trial. So we are done with this trial, which looks great. It looks groovy. Now, let me see if I can close this little area thing. So you can see here in the quality of every file, all the ones that have not done any gap filling in it yet, there is nothing there, right? These 4 means it's just there's 4 unused markers, which just means the 4 neck ones, right? So essentially, if you see a 4 here, you're good, actually. What are these? Oh, like the amount of gaps. So I'll show you in the very first one that I showed you, this trip one. One of the markers actually has a gap all the way at the end. Let me see which one it is. Oh yeah, it was the ankle one for whatever reason. So the ankle disappears at the end, right? And you can see in this orange, it's gone for the last 4 frames. And obviously, because it's gone for the last, it can't figure out where it's going to end up at the end. It's not a gap anymore. It's just, it cuts off too early. So if this happens, like I said, if you can't fill in the gap, if I try and click fill, it won't even let me, right? If you try and do that, then that's fine. no worries about that. Okay, but just try and minimize the amount of gaps and have everything labeled. This 75% thing, what does that even mean? 75% of the markers in this trial. Well, I guess that's the 4 neck ones, right? The 4. So if you see 75%, that's actually 100%, unless the markers obviously aren't there. So you hit save on it, and then you just move on to the next one. So this took a little bit longer than expected, or not than expected, than it actually will take, just because my computer was slow, right? It goes by way faster than that. And you can get basically a subject probably in like 2-3 minutes, and there are, or not a subject, a trial in 2-3 minutes, and there's 72 trials. So that means it'll take you around 2-3 hours to do a subject, which is not that much. It's not, I'm only going to ask you to do 1 a week. So, spread it out, do, what, there's 72. So like do like 10 a day, and that would be pretty easy for 1 week. But I'm now going to go over one that sucks. All right. So you can end the video right now. I'm just going to do one more, but this one is one with way less markers. And I haven't looked at it enough to know if it's going to require me to actually use the neck markers or not. We're going to see. So, but we're going to, so you can end the video here if you really want to. All right, so we're going to start off with S2. These are ones that I'm going to take care of because the earliest ones are the worst one in terms of having markers. So as you can see, this one looks pretty bad. As I said, the right side kind of sucks. So the markers do start to appear, but there's lots of flashing, lots of calibration issues. The reason, a big reason for all of why it looks so bad in the early ones is because I constantly had to recalibrate with it to try and minimize these issues, and it would work for like a couple of trials and then it would stop working. So I'm not, it's a little bit difficult to work through it, but as long as the left side's looking good, then it's great. All right. So we are going to start and see when is the first frame that the right hip appears, right? So here, obviously, there's no way you're going to be able to fill this gap of where the right hip is, right? But I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. The Vicon's definitely, it's like trying its hardest not to crash, which I appreciate. I appreciate it trying its hardest. So yeah, so you can tell that this one, but I am taking most of the ones that suck, okay? After subject 10, it gets a lot better. Why? Great question. I did exactly the same thing, everything. I did add one more camera on the right side, which did help out a little bit. But other than that, there's not much I can say about why there was all of a sudden an improvement in the quality, but those are going to be the ones that I want to assign to you all because I do not want you to be going through this when this is not your research, right? This is my job, as it were, so this is not your cross to bear. And this right hip sucks. All right. I just can't wait to be done with it. There we go. Great. The right hip kind of sucks. Now we're going to look at the left hip, see if it's consistent throughout. As I suspected, the left hip's always there, which is great. That's really what I need. I need most of, or no, all of my metrics are in the sagittal plane, if you know what that means. Is it in the sagittal plane? Yeah. Yeah. I'm second guessing myself now. It's in the sagittal plane. I'm just going to go with that. And if I'm wrong, that's kind of sad. All right, see when the right shoulder appears. This sucks. Now, what is good though is it is appearing before the first step, which is really what matters. I need that first step. I need most of the kinematics at that first step. It still sucks, for sure. But this labeling process is essentially how most other softwares do as well. Like it's not there. Let me just say this. If I had a lot more markers, you could actually build a pre-built skeleton. And a pre-built skeleton with a lot more markers auto labels when it does it. And that is what my first study, I did a smaller study, I had way more markers, and that auto labeled everything, meaning, but sometimes I got the labeling wrong. So you did have to go back through and verify it, but you didn't have to go through all this stuff. And then you could just do gap filling. And most of the time it was pretty correct when there was that many markers. But all right, so here's a good instance. So there's two markers that we need to, so it looks like this one's the phantom one. So we're going to do the top one. All right, you can see that this one's actually like not a real marker. It's annoying that it's even appearing. But since this shoulder, yeah, the shoulder's here the entire trial. Literally no gaps. So because of that, I'm not going to do the neck one. Because I can still get my data from the left shoulder. Now let's look at the right knee. Let me zoom down with it a little bit. See when the right knee appears. If it appears. What the heck, dude? All right, the right knee's just not there. Wow, that's wild. All right. And this is a rough one. It's okay. You can't win them all. That's not the heel one, is it? Okay, it's not the heel one. Great. All right, so that's the ankle. Yeah, don't worry, you all do not have to go through it, but this is just the worst case scenario that I'm trying to show you. What the heck? Why? I do not remember it being this bad, but this was a while back, I guess, but I seriously don't remember it. I think it must be because this is one of the very first few subjects. So this subject, I'm just going to have to deal with how bad it is, right? What was that? It's like not even worth it to get this ankle. But I have to label it as much as I can. Because even if it's there for just that fraction of a second, I may be able to fill in some gaps. Wow, that one sucked. The right knee was never there. The right toe. Oh my. Here's the right toe. I wonder if y'all are going to watch this part. Hopefully you're doing something else, like cooking dinner or something. Make it worth your time. You're not just watching me go through some absolutely atrocious marker data. Like, this is sad, to be honest with you. Like you saw the other trial. You know that it doesn't look like this normally. Like the other trial, pretty accurate to what it normally looks like. You know, and then the neck one, the necks all never looked weirdly bad because it was. These are some whack markers. Heck. And that's like just a phantom marker. Oh, okay, here's the heel. Here's the. Okay, yeah, I see it. I see it now. My perspective was just stupid. This is so funny. I'm gonna honestly just tell y'all tomorrow in the lab. Just like if you want to watch the last part, you can, but I don't know if it's worth your time. If you just want to see just a really like the worst case scenario, watch this part. Hey, there's the whole foot. The whole foot's here. The whole gang's here. Wow. Look at this. Sad. I was gonna bring goodies tomorrow, but Gabby beat me by 20 minutes. And offering to bring food. So I get it next time. Left knee. At least the left foot. Does the left foot, is that? Yes, it's the first stepping foot. Let's go. Dude, I didn't even get these ankle ones. 1 second. These are all the ankle ones. Right? Yeah, it's all the ankle ones. Didn't I even get this toe one? Oh, okay, never mind. There's just 2. Oh, Christ. All right. Let's see if the left knee stays there the entire time. Wow. I love the left side. I might become left-handed just because of this. Because all the data is like this. Look at that. Wow. So amazing. It looks like only the left heel is going to disappear. That's incredible. Truly incredible. People sticking around, watching this. The left gang was up in arms. Something like that. Well, okay, that's the heel. I was like, why is that unlabeled? I thought I was dumb. So dumb. Oh, that's some flickering. That's okay. Yeah, dude, my computer is so slow. This is normally a way faster, but I gotta like wait a second or two to like actually. Wait, did I miss? No, okay, that was just the phantom one. I'll like wait a second or two for my actions to click in. I don't know when it's gonna show up in the Zoom recording. Like I don't know if it's recording like a normal or if it's also gonna look like way worse than it looks like to my eye. Like it hurts my eyes, like it's hurting. I promise it's not like this unless you have like a potato computer, but I'm sure you all have better computers than me because from the past or from more future. Get it. I'm not in it right now. There we go. I hit escape to do it. I'm gonna hit save. All right, look at this. Let's just take a gander, shall we? So I took a gander at that. Wow, wait, no, yeah, I forgot. I can't hit play when it's lagging. Wow, it's really just a left side and then sometimes a right side and never a right knee. So here's a great example of where the left shoulder is always there. So I can still get a gauge of their torso angle. I do not need anything. So I'm going to run the spline, but not save it. I want to see, because what's interesting is here, look at these gaps, right? The left heel and the left toe. Max gap length, 2. That's great, right? That's such a low max length thing. Right ankle, hopeless, 34 Gs. Right heel, 12. Right hip has 14 gaps, but the max gap length's only 9. So I'm really interested to see what the spline does with that. Same with the right shoulder. Now, it is true that it's not there for most of the beginning of the trial, right? So let's see. I'm gonna run this and see what it does. Let's see how it looks. See if it freaks out. There we go. That's pretty good. See the right hip. Right hip's doing good. Right hip's doing wonders. How about that? You know, left, or my right shoulders, not my right shoulder. But all that matters is on this one stepping frame. Both of them are there. Right. It didn't do anything for the feet though. Feet still suck. That's okay. So now if we go back to the labeling, you can see, oh yeah, maybe I try and run it again. Now that it has those gaps are filled. Now I can work with it. Try it again. Because why not? You know, just run it 100 times and then you'll be fine. Is it still on max 5? No, it's on max 10. All right. So yeah, so there's still gaps. It cannot fill it in. Oh yeah, because okay. It's not here for the beginning part of it, so that's fine. All right. So here is your beautiful, so this would be a call to done one. I'm gonna save that, and then this is just a done deal. It kind of sucks, but these are the kinds of things that I'm going to have to work with in my data analysis. But I have experience doing it, so it's not going to be bad. All right. Anyway, I don't want this video to be too long. All right. So we are going to, it's already probably really long. So that is everything you've seen me gone through too. This one sucked way more. Like I said, it's going to be way more. There's only one that was never used, but there's lots of gaps, which is fine. And then 55% of the markers, which is fine. All right, so yeah, I probably cut it off before here. All right, thank you for watching. Let me know if you have any issue.